bottom 10 teams. North on the bottom, work our way up to ninth. A question that needs to be answered in your mind on each of these teams. I've done all 10, to be perfectly honest, as a mistake of mine. But anyway, we can share them. So you were to kick off with North Melbourne.
Yeah, so I'm about as pessimistic on North as I have been of any club in history. But I want you to give me the counter view on North. And the question is, what is the best case scenario for North in 2023? What's the ceiling of where they can get to?
Well, if I'm being the North Melbourne voice here, you never put a number on it because that'll just forever come back to haunt you. Percentage, I think, is a good way of measuring it as opposed to specific win-losses. And this could be the Clarkson factor as his ability to come into a club, if in fact that's how it all works out, and put in place some defensive mechanisms that will ensure you don't get opened up in the manner that you did. They were talking about Good Friday games. Alistair Clarkson coach team on a big stage like that, 190-point sort of aggregate over 2 years. I'm not sure that sort of stuff would happen. Maybe it will, but the best case is that gap in the percentage. It was 55 this year.
Yes,
which is that is suggesting you're in a pretty parlous place. But I've seen it before from other clubs, and you can't fix it in a week or a month or a year. It's just got to start, and I think they've got the right man if he's able to do it and get there. My question on this, I can throw the one back to you because I've got one up my sleeve. Where will he make the biggest difference, Alistair Clarkson? Where do you think he will make the biggest difference with this side?
Yeah, I think it'll be the defensive stuff, but just the standards holistically. I mean, some of the effort defensively was as bad as you've seen, and their ball use. Like I haven't seen a team turn the footy over as often and as poorly as what they had done. Just the basic skill level as well. So some method with the way that they use the ball, which will help them with the way that they defend the ground, and just the general standards of the whole of the footy club will lift.
Yeah, I think that's the key. You're on edge straight away.
Yeah.
Why West Coast next? Why are they so passive? Why have they been so passive in the past couple of seasons? And why have we as a footy public been so accepting of where they find themselves? They're probably the most financially secure football club in the whole damn competition, yet it would appear, anyway, from the other side of the country where we are, that they just have not accepted it, but they haven't been overly active.
It's an excellent question. Can you imagine the last 2 years, if that was Essendon or St Kilda or Collingwood, how we would be talking about West Coast? I'm strong on them as well. I believe they're in denial. They put their hand up for Luke Jackson. They had no chance of getting Luke Jackson. Can you imagine West Coast 4 years ago being zero chance to get Luke Jackson? They presented to him, they sat him down mid-year, and Luke's gone, no, I'm going to Fremantle. This is the marquee free agent on the market, West Australian boy, and he's gone for Fremantle over West Coast. They're really sensitive and talking about standards. They have allowed their players to get away with far too much, and they continue to deny that. They play a boring game style. They have gifted contracts to players who don't deserve them. And I don't see an easy way out for them because they have neglected the talent in the draft. So
how does a premiership coach...
I don't know.
How does a premiership, if what you're saying is right, how would he be accepting of non-satisfactory standards?
I don't know, but all you can do is look at it. And you can look at the way that the players present themselves. Yes, there's some luck with injuries, but there's also a fair amount of preparation. You continually get injured. You got to look at your preparation of the players and how you've prepared them. So I think there's some responsibility on Adam. Now, they would use the COVID stuff as an excuse, which for a brief period was probably fair in the travel. But, the one thing they need to get back to is being an elite football club and an elite environment, and I don't think they've had that. And play a bit more with a bit more flair. You want to go and watch West Coast. I haven't wanted to watch them in the last couple of years. For me, Gaz, the Giants are up. Now, they got a new coach, and the core group of Green, Whitfield, Haynes, Cornelio, Hogan, Himmelberg, Kelly, Taylor, Perryman, and Ward. Is that good enough of a core group with the youngsters there to bounce up the ladder with the new coach, or is the next 4 years going to be absolutely painful for the Giants?
No, I think that's a capable enough midfield to mean that they're competitive enough to be knocking on the door. it's a forward of the footy for me situation where you look at it and can Jesse Hogan continue to... Well, he got better. He showed signs through the course of the year. They threw Himmelberg around. Toby Green's their most important player, of course. He's the standard that he sets. I think the reset needed to happen because when you look at the players, like Lockie Whitfield is a player that I've known and loved and coached early in his youth, so I watched him really closely. And what he was always from the time he was 15 was the most unrelenting worker from end to end, who pushed himself to all the things that you love as a player. Now I don't know. I got no idea if he was injured, but he looked to me either injured or disinterested. And he's been anything but a disinterested footballer. Like, he was a standard setter. So when I see him passively exist in the AFL, I know there's a problem. Now, it's either with him from a body point of view or there's something else going on. So I know the quality of him. I know the quality of those other players. The question I had for you going back is they wasted the golden draft hand, The AFL have handed them this golden draft hand over a long period of time. Yet both these expansion clubs we watched this year just draft them out, trade them out. They know they got some back for Taranto and Hopper. But Tim Taranto 3 years ago won a best and fairest, or 4 years ago won a best and fairest in a grand final year. And then with an expansion club trying to establish themselves, he's gone. I don't work.
And then it goes again. They got one of the great draft hands you'll ever see this year, including the number one pick, which they're going to take a key forward. So the merry-go-round continues, and they got some issues there. But the core group of players is good enough to be to remain competitive, and I rate Adam Kingsley. I think he'll do a good job and put some mechanisms in place.
Who's Essendon's most important player? And when I say most important, I'm talking about the player who's going to sit alongside Chris Scott. I get those boys wrong. Brad Scott.
So do I.
And drive them to the standards that they need to be driven to, given that this is a playing group who went to their coach and said, you've got to coach us harder. This was last year. This season, you've got to coach us harder. And who is their most important player?
It's merit in that space, and everything you hear about him is that he's fed up and he's had enough with all of that. And there was some hesitation about signing the big deal that he did a year or so ago, committed, I think it was for 6 years. He is the next captain. He has to be. They'll make that call this year, you would think. So he is the one. But it's not just on him. I mean, it's on that midfield who have been just so poor defensively and a selfish midfield. I think that's fair, and I think even they would say, selfish is a strong word, but I think that even they would say that. So how do they get the mix to everyone to buy in? How do they get Jake Stringer fit? How do they kick enough goals? How do they defend like their life depends on it? Because teams just waltz through the middle of the ground from the back half against Essendon, and there's been no structure. But your question is merit. Do you agree with that, or is there someone else?
Yeah, no, I probably agree with that. It's accepting. So you go back to Melbourne, for instance, who were all great ball winners in the mid. You talk about a midfield group. It's an acceptance of role in amongst there that you just can't all be 35 possessioners. And somewhere along the way they've got it, and Brad will get the balance right. So having Parrish and Merritt all in the centre at the same time just doesn't work. You can't have blokes that just hunt, and you need better balance. So Merritt probably is the driver of it, but I think it's a big question. It's a big question for them, and I'll be interested to see how it unfolds.
Bombers fans, you can join in, and any team you can join in with us and join in the conversation on that one. Adelaide, so it's year 4 of the rebuild. They went 3 wins, 7 wins, 8 wins. Is finals the benchmark for the Crows year 4 into a rebuild for Matthew Nicks? And do they have the group to do it?
I don't think they will get there, personally. And I wonder what's going on over there in Adelaide. And
in what way?
Where's the stars? Where are the stars in this Adelaide side? And I know back in the day it was different because you had your Adelaide-based players. The Adelaide Crows in the South Australian footballing landscape for me was always something I looked upon as going, this is one of the greatest states producing quality footballer year after year. When I think Adelaide, I've written these names down, right? So Modra, Rashudo, McLeod, Goodwin, Hart, Jarman. Then you go back, South Australian players, Kernahan, Bradley, Motley. I know you can't get access to them all, but who is the player? Where's the marquee man who just drives you to Adelaide? If TV's on, I'm watching Adelaide. Bang, I don't want to play Adelaide because this bloke's going to... Tex is still their big dog. Your mate, who's had a fantastic year. Where's the star factor gone from the
So
Adelaide Crows?
I would think Phil Thorpe is going to get there.
Yes.
You've got Rankin now, who will put bums on seats. Rochelle's not a South Australian, but clearly he's a Crows player, second year, and we
all
know
good
what
kids,
he's capable
all good kids.
of doing.
Rankin's not a kid.
So there is no. They don't have a player in the top 50 of the Herald Sun today. No. There is, and it's reasonable. And there's, I'm devil's advocate here, but I'm largely agreeing with what you're saying, particularly in the midfield.
Yeah,
like there's no.
Rory Laird's a jet.
He's a good player. He's a 3-time best and fairest winner. Ben Keys is a worker. They've got Pedler and Berry and Sloan. They're all workers. Adelaide are obsessed with 182 centimetre competitive tackling midfielders with no speed and explosiveness on the outside. They've been obsessed with them. Now, they've done nothing to address that in the off-season. I love Phil Thorpe, I love Rankin, I love Rochelle. So forward of the ball, and Walker's still got a couple of good years left in him, but the midfield needs some depth. So no finals for you.
Been bland for too long, and I know that's sometimes out of your hands, but come on, give us some superstars. Is it Hawthorn?
It is Hawthorn.
Can you cut too deep? It's a simple question. Can you cut too deep? And have they cut too deep?
Yeah, and we've seen examples of that, and I think it's a real risk for them. But I do have a lot of faith in Sam Mitchell. I think he has the potential to be a great coach.
Why?
And that's just, he's come into Footy Classified a couple of times, and we interview him fortnightly with Kingy and myself on Fireball Friday. So you get to know them a little bit better. He talks football like a genius, and then talks a language that not many that you've experienced over the time in your game can talk. So I've got his intellect, football-wise, and I think he's developing the management side of things. So I've got a lot of faith in him.
Has he seduced you with his?
No, he hasn't.
With his
he hasn't, because I'll just call it.
Like it.
No, I'll just call it as I see it. If I think you're no good, I'll say it. But I think he's very good. But I hope they give him the time, and he's going to need time because you can cut too deep. To answer your question, North have done it. The Crows have done it. Many in the past have done it. I didn't get the benefit of going with O'Meara because you didn't get anything back for him. And I just think they're better off with him. So, yeah, big year for the Hawks.
Gold Coast Suns, they're the team that you question about Adelaide should be put to them. So it is finals time for this footy club. 10 wins, 12 losses, had themselves in contention. I think you reappoint Stuart Dew on the back of that, then you're reappointing him because you think he's the right man to take him into finals. So that's the minimum for them in the next 2 years. I like their midfield. Miller, Anderson, Swallow, Powell, Rao, Ainsworth, Alex Davies can play. Will Powell's King's
back.
King's the key. King's the king. So you bring him into a side, and then Chol doesn't have to play in the number one, which means Casbolt can still be there if he need be. They'll miss Rankin. Ainsworth you've spoken about this morning. I like Collins in the back half and Ballard. So, I think they're going okay. And there's a possibility of playing finals footy, but they need to in the next couple of years.
Yep, absolutely. What about Port Adelaide?
Port Adelaide. What have I got for them? Okay, this is what the sense I get. Now, I'm away from Adelaide. I have a sense that and I want to know whether this is the external or whether it's shared internally, that it is a rite of passage for them to return to finals footy next year, that this preliminary final team that dropped out of the 8 is now just, for whatever reason, I don't know what it is, but it's an automatic. Not only are they coming back in, but they're going to contend for a premiership on the back of having missed the finals. Is that external noise that I've misread, or I hope that's not being shared internally?
No, I would think they would believe that they are capable of doing that. But
there's no rite of passage.
No, there's not. And there's the coach who's going to be under more pressure than any other coach in the league next year. And if you start 1 and 3, that pressure is going to be unbearable. And if it gets worse, then they will make a call at some point. Now, the information that I've got is that Ken wants to go into it with a really good attitude. He wants to play faster, more attacking football, surround himself with good people, which he's done, those that he trusts in his coaching department. The midfield, the possibilities in the midfield with Butters and Rosie. Butters hasn't scratched the surface yet and hasn't had a decent run at it. Lysett comes back after been in a hospital bed for the majority of the year. The one question I have is on their defence, and they weren't able to shore that up with Ratugolea. They're too small, so Cleary and Jonas have to play tall. Mackenzie's going to have to play tall again, and Aliir did a good job late in the season on playing on those big key forwards, but that's where they're really vulnerable. Now, can you win a premiership when you are that vulnerable personnel-wise behind the ball? Probably not. So there's still some glaring holes personnel-wise, but Lysa comes back. Georgiades and Marshall and Dixon is exciting. Who knows with Fantasia? Who knows with Rioli? I think that's a question mark that is legitimate. Can he get fit and can he be a bona fide AFL player? I don't know. And is Horne-Francis going to be Horne-Francis in year 2? I think he'll get there in year 5, but is he going to make a massive difference in year 2? Are all reasonable questions, Gaz. But yeah, pass mark is top 4.
So they need Butters to take a step like Rosie did.
Yep.
And we just heard, it used to be the 3. Oh, you wait till Butters, Rosie, Dersma get into this midfield. Well, Rosie has and has established himself. Butters, by the end of this next year, needs to have a similar tick next to his name. I'm not sure whether Xavier Dersma, he can play wing. He can play wing still. I'm not sure he's going to be an inside mid. So, and then the reliance on Charlie is their best footy is when Charlie's been Charlie. And to the same point, Georgiades and Marshall both get mentioned. Yeah, Georgiades. You go, yeah. Well, Marshall has. And Georgiades has to. So they're the ticks. They're the two for me that if they can add another quality midfielder through the development of Butters, and if Georgiades can become the player that everyone has had him penciled in as, then yes, they can do some damage.
Saints have had a big week. We're just assuming Ross will get the job, and you're pretty confident in saying that. What will be Ross's first move? Because it is late to get the job. It's going to be the end of October.
And that's a really good question because from a coaching point of view, he's put a line through it. It's not as if he's a coach who's been sitting there working year in, year out ferociously on how he wants to play.
Michael Voss, is it?
No, exactly. And, this is not a criticism or a knock. He stayed involved through his media work, but that's different to being, 70 hours a week working on footy and working on opposition and game trends and plans and all that sort of stuff. And in his own mind, by his own admission, at various stages throughout this year and last, that coaching's not on his agenda. So now, we put a lot of faith in him, and I've got I understand. I think he's a fantastic football person. He's been out for a long time, so all that's a great question about what his first move will be. He'll get his feet under the table and he'll work ferociously hard to get himself up to the speed he needs to be. But he's got some work to do. My question for you on the back of this, is he the right man for the right club, or is he an example of a Messiah syndrome being ferociously driven by his acolytes of yesteryear?
Is he probably the latter? I think the groundswell of those that are influential around the club. It's risky. I mean, we've seen clubs go back to the well with greats, and we've seen sort of Carlton do it and others, and it feels very much back to the future a little bit. For me, it's St Kilda. But having said that, I'm like you. I'm fascinated to see how it goes.
It's going to be great fun watching.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be a terrific media story. What about the Blues?
Well, can they be better placed? I mean, they got Coleman medalists. They got Brownlow medalists. They got fullback who can play on any forward, really, and with some great confidence. You've got potentially another Brownlow medalist who plays the game in the modern style. I mean, what do they want for, and how can they be thinking anything other than top 4?
Nothing. Maybe a really dangerous small forward. But I do like Fisher. And Martin hasn't sort of scratched the surface on his ability. So nothing. They got the two big forwards. They got a young potential backup ruckman / forward who everyone wants. Everyone doesn't want a second ruckman. They want one that can play 20%, then go forward and be dangerous. They got a tough midfield, like really tough. You look at how tough Geelong were in that grand final, and Carlton can match it in that space. So nothing.
Back half a worry?
Yeah.
Wiedering aside?
Perhaps the back half is a worry, but I think you can get away with that because you've got Wiedering and because he's prepared to put his hand up and play on the best opposition player every week. But yeah, that would be a reasonable question, but every side's got an area that they would love to address. But then I look at and all the individual stuff you mentioned, I look at how many finals Patrick Cripps has played in, and it's 0. How many finals was Walter? 0. Weeding 0. So there's that question of, can this group stand up on the big stage in September for 3 or 4 games in a row? And we will never know that until they put themselves in a position to be able to do that.
Yep. Yeah. And I don't care what anyone says, the value of 2 big dogs in your forward half who are capable of doing what those 2 boys are capable of doing is as exciting as anything for that football club if I was a Carlton supporter. So that's the way we see these 10 teams. We'll have a look at the other 8 tomorrow, but you can join in at any stage, or you can send your messages through and give us your thoughts on it.